Well, I think one of the things that I think you need to hear as a listener is that if you're an entrepreneur, closing the business doesn't mean it's the end of your entrepreneur journey.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode where we interviewed Megan. If you haven't listened to that, please go back and listen because it's some of the best nuggets you're going to get. I would say, I think I was writing down 5 or 6 nuggets in a row. It was really good stuff. So encouraged to go back. But let's move forward to today's episode. So I named this "You Made a Mistake." So this is basically saying, did you start your business? Did something happen, and now all of a sudden it's not working right, or maybe you didn't do the right business first? Because I think it's pretty rare that somebody starts their first business and it's 100% successful. I think most people, it's not their first business or their second, maybe their third or fourth business before they find that true success. I think even Nick could attest to some of that. Nick the marketer is not his first business.
No, and failure isn't necessarily a terrible thing. We'll talk about that a little bit today. But yeah, this is my actual third business. So I've had, like most everybody else, I've had multiple career changes.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't one of those that hopped every 2 years, to be clear about that. My average job stint is about 5 to 6 years, believe it or not. But in those time frames, all the way back to 2003, I've started businesses and I've failed businesses, and I've helped my wife start a business, and I wouldn't say it failed just as much as she just didn't pursue it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because it was successful.
Well, I would say, sometimes, from my personal experience, sometimes you start a business because you love what it is, you love the industry, or you love the hobby, and it became something you got paid for. But the business made you hate it over time, and you want to get out of it. Where your interests are I love that, but now that money's tied to it, stress is tied to it, now I don't love it anymore. That's a real thing. And I think some people probably go through that. I think they really look at it and say, we'll just take an example. Let's say you love working on your car or something like that. And you're like, well, I'm pretty good at this. I could probably make a mechanic job out of this type of thing or business. And then you start to hate it. You start to hate cars because all you see is just money problems or stress or unhappy employees or crazy customers, stuff like that. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, more than that, resentment will set in.
Oh, yeah.
And not just resentment that you have toward this thing that isn't bringing the level of success that you wanted. It's also your family will start resenting it. People that you care about and people that you love will start resenting it. There's ways to head that off. There's ways to deal with that. Part of that is how you talk about the business. Part of that is how you respond to negative situations.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is making good decisions when something is failing. Not everything's your fault.
Yeah, I think one thing too, I think a good example of this is you started a business, you were doing something a certain way, and the industry around you changed. We could say COVID's a perfect example of forcing businesses to do something different because what they were doing wasn't working anymore. And when you just don't want to do that and you don't want to change, you're going to eventually fail at some point because the market's going to demand a change out of you. And if you're not going to do it, or you don't know how to change, now you have something else to deal with. It's not just you have good intentions, you want to do the right thing, and you feel I had this figured out. Why is it changing, and why isn't it working anymore? If I just keep doing the same thing over and over again, it'll make a difference, and that's insanity, right?
That's right.
You're doing the same thing over again, expecting a different results, and you're trying to hit your head against the wall. Why is this not working anymore? Well, maybe things have changed, and your business will eventually fail if you don't change with it occasionally.
So typically we talk about my successes, my failures, and I bet you even want to do that today, but I'm going to change the script on you a little bit because when I was going through and prepping for this and reading the notes, I wanted to talk about love behind the lens.
Oh, yeah.
You own a photography business, wedding photography mostly.
Yep.
and you and your wife run it. Does she own it? Do you own it? Are y'all co-owners?
Legally speaking, I own it.
Okay, legally it's your business. Love Behind the Lens. You would have gotten some tax breaks if you let her own it. I'm just throwing that out there.
I know.
But hey, you know what's funny? On a complete side note, my CPA's like, "Have you ever thought about transferring Nick the marketer over to your wife for tax purposes?"
I mean, there are some advantages for sure. I mean, there are lots of advantages.
Anyway, I don't know how much of this you want to share, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So you guys have been doing this for years.
Yeah, we officially been doing it since 2014.
And 2014, it's 2021, and y'all are in a transition.
Yep.
Let's talk about that, because this isn't necessarily a business doomed to failure. Y'all have been successful for all these years, but something's changed.
Yeah, so just a little background. This is the classic example where photography was a hobby of mine, and I distinctly remember saying I would never shoot a wedding. I remember telling people that. I was like, no, I like taking pictures of random stuff and just having. I like the technical side of a camera, and I enjoyed that part. But so I was just like, I'm never going to shoot a wedding. And we had a church family member friend that said, hey, we have a wedding coming up. Would you want to shoot it? We know you like photography. I'm like, I don't know. And well, Courtney, this is when Courtney and I weren't even married yet. Hey, you want to come shoot a wedding with me? I have no idea how this is going to work. Okay. So we did all our research, and the rest is history. But so we started that business, and then we got married. And it was really just a side business thing. You know, it's just something that we did on the weekends for fun and stuff like that. Enjoyed that. And then Courtney was, she was at Montevallo, and she was finishing up school and with a degree in drawing and trying to figure out if she wanted to teach or whatever. And then I was like, well, we're doing pretty well with the wedding photography. How about we just push for that? And so we had some goals set up, and then her first official year out of school, we ended up shooting 27 weddings in a year. I'll never forget that number, because that's way too many weddings to shoot in a year.
Right.
Especially when you're in an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment, and yeah, there's a lot of equipment and stuff. We were doing trade shows, doing all the things. Anyway, so fast forward. So did really well. Talking about success-wise, you know, we've shot over 100, almost 150 weddings. Been on the face of a magazine here, on a state level magazine. Been featured in some stuff. Notably, probably one of the top 10 wedding photographers in Birmingham. Like, did really well with it. Well, then we had Addie. Mm-hmm. So Addie is now, she'll be 2 years old next month.
I can't even believe that.
Yeah, I was telling Devin about the whole thing and how, you know, you gave me a month off essentially when Addie was born, which is kind of crazy to think about for the male in the situation.
Right.
But anyway, so Addie was born, and the priorities started to shift. We started to realize that with me working full time, and then with Addie, and then weddings would take our weekends, and then the weekends that we had off was just like we're slugs because we just didn't have any rest between all that. We started to realize, okay, maybe wedding photography isn't the end all be all, and there was some resentment toward the industry,
right?
And then especially, I mean, sorry, wedding industry, but you know, it's a vain industry. Like, it's supposed to be a very pretty day, and it's supposed to look really nice and perfect. And, you know, everybody's like, I have to have the perfect wedding day, and it's not always that way. And then when you're on Instagram and stuff like that, because that's how you attract potential brides, essentially, you're on social media, you know, the photos that were put out there, those are the best photos. You know, that is the best of that wedding day. That is the best of us. You know, you're not going to get the bad. And so that's, you know, that's just a tough industry to be in, a lot of imposter syndrome and stuff like that to deal with. And so COVID hit, and then that became like, it just sealed it for us. Like, all these weddings that we had planned in COVID, they got rescheduled. We had a couple just kind of cancel and just get married and just avoid the wedding altogether. And then we had this break that we weren't anticipating. We had like a good 6 months of like nothing to do essentially, and it was Wonderful.
You started to go, hey, is this really what I want to be doing right now? Like, is this really what I want to continue to pursue?
Yeah. And so, we basically had that moment of like, okay, we do like our weekends. Addie is growing up really fast, like I said, 2 years, and it's fun to go do stuff and not have to worry about because when somebody books a wedding with you, they're booking a year and a half in advance.
That's right.
And we're down to our last few weddings, and like our last one's this coming December, and they like it's incredible. I'll say it's incredible that we've never missed a wedding, because we had this one wedding that was booked 2 years in advance, which is just kind of crazy to think about. But overall, like, yeah, like everything just like, wait, I don't have to plan this out. Because we would this is kind of sad. We've been to 150 weddings to shoot. We've only been guests to one as a married couple, one or two, not many. And then even my best friend, I got married. We shot the wedding, and I was in the wedding, so that was fun. But we loved it to death, and do it all over again. But it's like the joy gets kind of sucked out of it because you have a responsibility you have to do, and you can't just go. Because we joke, like when we went to one of the weddings as a married couple, we were judging the photographer and all that stuff. But then we're like, wait, we just showed up at the wedding, sat down for 15 minutes, and then walked over to reception and hung out for an hour and a half and went home. Like, that's amazing, because typically a wedding to us is 12 hours. And
that's a lot of time.
12 hours, a massive babysitting bill at the end of the day.
Right.
And then the time, we almost had our babysitter for one of our weddings, like, couldn't show. Like, she had some issues. She ended up coming. And then we brought Addie to one of our weddings, then had the babysitter on site trying to test that out, and not a fan.
I bet that did not go well.
So it wasn't terrible, but it has to be a very special situation. So we had a babysitter come with us. It was at a church. So they had like the nursery section, whatever. But you could like, let me go check on Addie. And then like, you can't do that. Like, your focus is somewhere else. And so all that being said, like, we're moving out of it, and we're thankful for what we learned, what we gained out of it. Just the clients that we had were fantastic. Never had a bridezilla, which I think people laugh at that we never had one. We had some crazy family members.
Yeah, it's like either the in-laws or the mother, right?
Yeah, it was. Yes, we had some interesting family members for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's that classic we did. And it was so funny, and you may not even know this. So we were trying to get the business to grow to a certain point where I could quit my job, my previous job, and just do that full time.
I bet you were trying real hard to quit that job.
I was, but I mentally was having issues getting out of that job too. Like, it wasn't like, essentially I wanted to make like $80,000 a year on just wedding photography, and we were just about there. I'm about to average that, and then just worn out. And then you came along, and that's how everything changed. And now we're just getting out of the wedding photography in general. So,
well, let me frame it up real quick. So, because I'm really interested to hear how you started and how you ended. We've gotten into how you started, where the business went. You started as a hobby. You were interested in it. You liked the technical piece of it. Quickly, you and Courtney realized, hey, there's profit to be made in weddings. We could do something with this. You grew it to where your first full year you did 27 weddings. That's 27 weekends. That's 27 out of 52. That's over half of your year.
Well, and then the other part people forget about. So it takes Courtney on a good day, or a good week, it'll take her a full 1 or 2 weeks to edit those photos.
Right.
So then she had 27 weddings to edit, and then we were shooting 3,000 to 4,000 photos a wedding. So, she had to look through essentially 80,000 photos in a year, call and edit and so forth, like major time sinks.
Oh yeah. And there's a ton involved in that. I'm positive of that, just from company photos that we've done. And those are easy in comparison. So you get to this point, COVID hits, the world shuts down, you start getting weeks and weeks and weeks of your time back, and you start to realize, I kind of resent this business that we've built. When you're in the thick of it and you're getting after it, you don't always realize that you don't love it.
Yeah, we had a lot of focus when we were in the thick of it. We were just focusing on getting better than the previous wedding, getting better than the previous year. We weren't focusing on our personal lives
Right.
really at all at that point.
Right, and that'll devastate a marriage. I know that.
Mhm.
But what's interesting to me is that y'all made a conscious decision to phase out, and that sounds easy. That is, I've done this now 2 previous times. It's incredibly difficult to phase out of a business. You've poured time, you've missed birthdays, you've poured in Christmases. Like you've taken real valuable time, real valuable memories, real valuable effort, and you've poured it into this baby called a business.
Hmm.
And now you're setting it up for adoption, or you're killing the baby. Like,
Well,
there's like,
yeah, I mean, and then that's also the part like, God, we put in all this effort and work and money and time, and like you said, missing key events for family members, and we're just saying goodbye to it.
right.
And there's no like, you don't really get anything out of it when it's gone.
Yeah, photography's weird. It's not necessarily an asset.
Yeah, like we have equipment. You know, we have probably close to $20,000 worth of equipment we use, uh, but that's it. Like, there's no like, well, I'm going to sell this puppy off and make a bunch of money, and it's really not a thing because
Yeah.
you can build a brand and you can kind of sell the brand, I guess. But beyond that, like when you say stop, it's done.
It's done.
Of course, the challenge with a wedding photography, when you say stop, you really say, okay, I'm stopping booking now.
That's right.
I still got another year of doing the business.
So that brings me to another point. I knew you were going to bring that up. Okay, and I'm glad you did, because here you've made the mental switch to say we're done. We're out of the business. We're not taking on any new clients. We're booked up for another 8, 12, 14 months
Yeah.
of weekends that we've obliged ourselves to.
Mhm.
How do you do that when you've checked out? I mean, you've seen this. I've seen this. When somebody's made the switch, they've gone and found another job. They've moved on mentally. They do crap work inside of our office or wherever they're working. Right?
Because they moved on.
I've accidentally done this. Nobody does it on purpose, right? But you've made the mental switch, right? So the previous job that I worked at, when I was done, I was done. Now I stayed there and did with integrity the best I could, but I had moved on mentally. I was done.
Yeah. Well, I would say so. When we made the decision to, all right, this is a good thing to move on, you know, and we said we're not going to book anymore, and there was that thought of like, gosh, now we have these 5, 10 weddings that we're going to shoot. Are we going to botch or just not want to do it? And that's just completely unfair to that client, right? Because
Right.
they can't go switch photographers. We don't want them to. So like we had a wedding month and a half. We have a wedding actually this coming Saturday. So, and it's really like we changed our mentality of we want to do really great work, but we also want to finish on a high. We don't want to have resentment in the industry so much that people don't like us anymore. It's more like, well, I put it this way. Think about Seinfeld. It finished on a high, top show, whatever,
That's right.
and it cut it off. It didn't finish it when it was dying.
That's right.
And we still remember Seinfeld as a fantastic show, not a show that drove itself to the ground.
That's right.
So that's the mentality that we're taking. We're going to finish on a high. We're going to knock out the best stuff. And it's also like, hey, we're finishing this up. We're going to knock this out, and we're done.
So you talked about Seinfeld and Friends,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking like there's the other version of that, like The Walking Dead. I loved that show
We did too to a certain point.
for 4 seasons. They're going on 10. They're finally killing the show, and I'm like, that show died 6 years ago.
Yeah, we quit watching, well, when they killed off one of the main characters.
Right.
And we were just like, we're done. And then
So for me, it was when it stopped becoming about zombies and became about people, and I'm like, I don't care about the people. I want to see the zombies.
Yeah.
Like, of course, they don't call them zombies; they call them walkers. Nonetheless, you made the switch. You're phasing yourself out of the business. How do you keep? Let's talk to somebody who has started a business. They've been in this business now 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever years. They've made the mental switch. How do they keep from dragging it on? Because it's really difficult to kill that baby. I know that sounds horrible, but like you've always said, this business is my baby. You know what I'm talking about? I say that with our company now,
Yeah.
and I've said that about 2 previous companies. I just like this one better. But still, how do you keep from dragging it on when you've made that mental switch? When you made that decision, what do you do?
Well, so one of the things that we worked through was the pros and cons. If we kept the business going, what are we getting out of it? Is it just an ego pride thing? Hey, I got this business and I do this and I have fun with it. But when you look at the cons, like reevaluate why are you considering closing it? Okay, the cons are probably greater than the pros, and now look at the pros of once you've closed it, you now have an extra level of freedom you didn't have before, which could be an opportunity to start a different business. It could be an opportunity just to regain some personal life that you've lost, and you just have to weigh it out because you naturally will say, well, maybe I don't want to close this. It's not done yet. I could rekindle it or whatever. I mean, technically, that wedding photography, we could book another trade show, and boom, we got a bunch of extra clients coming in. But that doesn't solve a bigger goal of ours, right?
Was there an indicator years ago, maybe, that you knew you wanted, like, I want it out of this?
So I would say when the focus was more on just the money that was made and not the joy of doing the work itself. And and then another part was it got to the point where every wedding we shot, we had an issue.
Mm.
And it was not necessarily like an argument type of thing, but it was more like that would have been a great day if that didn't happen. And it just got to and we're like, well, I guess no wedding is going to be a great enough day. Like, I mean, the joy was starting to be sucked out of it. And then we were just like, well, we made a bunch of money off of that wedding, made a couple of grand, and that's great. We can go buy whatever. But that didn't really mean anything. Like the purpose of the company was just making some extra. Essentially, got somebody that was making vacation money.
Right.
It just the soul of it was kind of leaving.
It's funny that you say that because you never took vacations.
Yeah,
I just saw his eyes roll, y'all. His eyes. Just
well, that's the
rolled.
problem, right?
That's
It was for vacation money, and it ended up being used for random stuff. And
That's
then
right.
in my previous company, I was commission only sales with no recurring revenue of any sort. And so if I had a bad month, well, thank goodness we had a wedding.
There you at some point there you had a gut feeling that it's time to make a change.
Yeah. Well, and then Courtney had a bigger gut feeling. Like it was because the pressure.
That's not a gut feeling, sir. That's called women's intuition.
But it was definitely that's funny. Yeah, I mean, because to be honest, like, yeah, my name's on the business, but she has all the pressure.
Right.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm the chauffeur and the second shooter and the timekeeper. She's the pressure of making the photos look good, making the couples look the way they should, and then she gets to talk to them before and after. So there was all the pressure there, and so I was more of a bystander. I took care of the books and all that fun stuff, but yeah, like we just had a couple of conversations of basically like, do we want to keep doing it? Because I will say this, there was when we started to gain some financial freedom here with Nick the Marketer, where
Yay.
income was more predictable, and so the idea we started removing the idea that love behind the lens was a needed asset to keep money in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
We got once that we're like, okay, this is actually not as necessary, and then we actually hired a financial coach to kind of go through some of that. And it just became like when COVID hit, it's just like boom, 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 boom. Like, okay, this is becoming way more obvious now.
Right.
It's time to move on. And it's so hard. Like, it is so hard to say goodbye to that. Like, we go back and forth even right now. Just like we'll say, this is the right thing, right? Yes, it's the right thing. We need to move on.
It's really difficult when you've poured that level of effort into a business to just walk away. You're going to second guess yourself. You're going to say, like, did I eat some bad tacos last night? Like, you're going to start asking questions. But let me ask you this. Do you feel like you've failed at it?
No.
Okay, so the way I felt, I owned a multi-level marketing business. And yes, it was a business because I treated it like one.
Yep.
Okay, just to be clear about that, because I know there's a lot of oil people out there and all these other companies, and they're hustling on social media. Social media didn't exist when I was doing my business, my multi-level marketing business, and I was working really, really hard, and I had plans and goals. But I felt at the end when it was time for us to walk away from our business, I felt like I had failed, right? And I learned a major lesson. Let me do a mental visual real quick, okay? Draw in your mind a dot, and to the left draw an arrow, and to the right draw an arrow. Right? To the left is failure. To the right is success.
Okay.
And most people feel like they're the dot, and they're either moving closer to failure or closer to success. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I made a mental switch after my first business and realized that the dot is the starting point, and you're always moving to the right. Failure's in the middle, success is past that, and you actually have to move through the failure to get to the success. You have to.
Yeah.
So failure, I love it in the I did not love the new Star Wars movies, but there is one part of the new Star Wars movie where Yoda says failure the best teacher is.
Yeah.
Right? And it's funny because you always feel like failure is where it ends. And failure is the best tool to learn how to grow and get better. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on Business 3, which has become by far the most successful business. And there's more opportunities past this if you understand how failure works.
Well, and I think you even say too with the failure side, here at Nick the Marketer, we failed some clients.
Oh, no doubt.
And we learned a lot. We made process changes and to help prevent that failure, and now we're better because of it. I mean, let's be honest. If you're out there and say, I know exactly how to do this, I'm never going to fail at it, good luck. Or you're so blind to your failure that you're failing so miserably that you have no idea it's even happening.
I'll tell you what's frustrating, gut-wrenching, whatever you want to call it, is when your failure affects another person.
And that's a very common thing in a business. Mm-hmm. When you fail as a leader or you fail as a process you came up with and you're ignoring it, you're affecting more yourself 9 times out of 10. Because if you're a business, you have a client for one, or you have a coworker or an employee. Like, you can't just be a business of one and have no customers. It's not a business.
That's right. So let's give some practical tips. All right.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of a transition.
Yep.
You're in that final rollout of taking care of the rest of your wedding photographer clients, and then done. Right. And I've been through 2 failed businesses. What are some things that our audience can take away? I've got lots of things I could say, but what would you say if you feel like you're ready to step away from this business that you've built? What's the next step?
So I think one thing that was helpful to us was really getting a third party opinion on this is what's going on. Like, they may not know anything. And that's another thing with the wedding photography. We would hear a lot from people. Oh, you're going to shut it down. Why would you do that? It's such a wonderful, because I think it's beautiful. Like, oh, you just go shoot in the weekends and go and have a free week every week. Like, no, sorry. But when we had a third party person talk to, and they're like, well, it sounds like it makes because to them it's going to be super clear because they're not emotionally invested. They don't know what the last 7 years was. They don't know the ups and downs, but they just know what you're telling them right now. And when they're like, well, yeah, you should shut it down. I don't know why you're keeping it going. That mentality, because hearing that from somebody else, and maybe you got to hear it from one other person too, or somebody you're closer with.
The Bible says, in the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll see the common theme. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, that makes, what are you going to do next? That's the mentality. So what you going to do now?
Right.
I remember when we even told my side of family, they're like, well, okay, what are you going to do now? They're like, what's your next business?
What's the next move?
Yeah. So
that's a family of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. It was so funny because Courtney was afraid to tell them.
Right.
I said, you're dealing with my grandmother who's been part of a business for 80 years. You're dealing with my brother, and then all these like these are people that they live and breathe a local business. They're just like, okay, what now? And then they literally when it happened, they're like, so what are you gonna do now? What business you gonna start? And we started talking about this. Like, that'd be really great. What's the idea behind it, or how are you gonna distribute? You know, they're sort of asking. And my 95-year-old grandmother's like, so how do you gonna sell that? And then she's like asking all these business questions because she's been around the block.
She's an entrepreneur.
Like my grandfather, her husband had 3 or 4 businesses before the one they're currently in, and he actually was that classic had a construction business in the 70s, and then everything dried up construction wise, and he had to pivot and change, and he started a car dealership, and then that got wore on him, and then he had a bank. And so like and that's another thing too. Don't think that this sounds terrible. Don't think that you're unique, that you're closing a business.
Right.
Happens all the time. It's not a bad thing, honestly. Sometimes it's a worse. I remember I know we're getting a little like supposed to be summing this up, but it just comes to my mind. We've all seen Shark Tank. I would say most people that are listening are Shark Tank fans to some degree.
Probably. And
I remember one of the host people said, sometimes you need to know when to shut things down faster than keep dragging it on. And it was some phrase of that, but basically it's better for you to get it done, to finish it off now than to keep dragging on it and making it worse. Because you can get yourself in a lot more trouble if you keep dragging on something you don't care about, because you're going to let things slip through the cracks and it gets worse. And then like in our world, you know, if you just quit caring and you go shoot a wedding, it's terrible. All of a sudden you're going to have somebody could be suing you. Like, get out when it's just not, it doesn't make sense for you anymore. But anyway, going back to all that, getting counsel from multiple people made a huge difference. And then for us also just looking at like, what could we do with our weekends back? And are we going to regret looking in the future? Are we going to look back and say, why did we waste so much time on something so temporary and not putting back into ourselves? Because I think a business, you know, if it's not helping you personally at some level, there's some issues there too. If it's just draining you and you're getting no benefit out of it other than, oh, I haven't seen my husband and, you know, I see him for 10 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes before he goes to bed. And that's all I ever see him, or vice versa. I don't see my wife, but 10 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes before I go to bed for years.
Right.
Well, I mean, that you're giving up something greater at that point for your business. And is it really paying off?
I'd say no.
Right? But some people don't see it that way.
Well, I think one of the things that I think you need to hear as a listener is that if you're an entrepreneur, closing the business doesn't mean it's the end of your entrepreneur journey.
Exactly.
It's really the start of a new one.
Well, and then you say passing on something for opportunity for next or whatever, you know,
right.
Giving that capacity. Like, it's okay to fall in love with something new.
That's right.
And go after it. Or, I mean, like COVID is that classic example of like, okay, there's some certain things you just, like a restaurant, you can't, for a few months, you could not have somebody in your restaurant. Well, let's do the curbside. Let's do the delivery. And I'm sure there were businesses that were spawned out of that they closed one side of business and opened a new side. Like, it's not the end, because most people who are entrepreneurs.
Oh, dude, Chick-fil-A still hasn't opened up there.
Yeah, they're like, screw this. We're going to put in permanent drive-thrus.
Yeah, they're doing like permanent drive-thrus, and they could care less if you ever come inside again, because they have found a way to be profitable, efficient,
and
cut their cost,
and deliver a product that people still love. And
I do wonder, are they ever going to open back up? But that's another story.
So there was a new Chick-fil-A added near my house, and they spent more time installing the drive-through cover things and on the air conditioning, like the fan system.
That's right.
Like, the building was built for a while, and then they were taking forever to put in the drive part. But now that's like common. I can't find a Chick-fil-A without one.
No,
but it's just part of it. But yeah, I can't remember what you were saying, but it's okay to fail, and it's okay that with your level of spirit, you start a business, you probably still have it, and it's okay to start something new.
Take the good away, what you learned, and then take the failures along the way, the things that you would have done differently, and learn from those.
Oh, yeah.
And then start thinking about, what's my next move?
Yep.
I guess I'm doing a lot of metaphors today. I'm not trying to, but it is what it is. So if you can picture, there's two doors. You're hanging on to one door, and the next door of opportunity is just out of reach. You have to let go of the doorknob to take one step forward to go reach the other door, so you can open it and walk through it. But if you're hanging on to this other one, you can't reach the next one. You're just hanging on to the past. And if you live in the past, it's funny. Past successes will hold you back more than past failures.
Yep.
If you think that I can't do this, I used to be so successful. It's like that guy that peaked in high school when he was the quarterback of the high school football team and has lived his whole life being that quarterback of the football team.
And if y'all want to watch something, watch Cobra Kai.
Oh, so good.
Because that's that, right?
Literally peaked in high school.
He peaked in high school, and he kept living high school for 25 more years.
Right.
Or 30 more years.
Right. So, letting go of the opportunity that's no longer feeding your soul, feeding your spirit, feeding your entrepreneurial spirit, and taking the next step. And hey, look, that may be a job for a while. Mm-hmm. That may be a break for a while if you sold your business or something like that. But like anything that's on a vine, man, you're growing or you're dying, right? So prune the bad, take the good, move forward with it, and learn from your failures, learn from your mistakes, and don't dwell on all the successes because that'll hold you back too.
Yeah, and going back just a little bit, recognize is it time to shut it down? I think when you have nothing but pure resentment in your business, like there's nothing positive to look at except the money maybe. And even that could be a resentment because how much effort it took to make that money. Learn from that, one. And like you were saying, learn from the past failures and successes and things like that. Like I learned a ton about business in general and, the state wants this, the state wants that. Oh, you need to submit this and all this stuff. Well, these are like things like I can take and apply to the next business. And it's not scaring me. Like, okay, I know this has to happen. I know what to expect in terms of fees. I know what to expect. Like, I need my lawyer at this point, and I need an accountant at this point. I'm not going to make that mistake again, stuff like that. And then it cleans things up for you, so then you can put more focus on the new thing and less about the little minor things that every business requires. There's so much. You look at your failures as a pure teaching lesson.
That's good.
Period. Like, just look at it and say, all right, this is what write down what you learn from it. There's something you learn from it. If anything, you learn what not to do every time.
Oh man, so much of I've got more list of what not to do than I do of what to do. But you need to do standard operating procedures of what not to do.
There you go, exactly. And then you say if you find it in this file, don't do it.
That's right. That's right. This is a whole file of failures. Again, if you look at it through the mindset of I'm learning from this. Then you can go access that mental file of failures and say, hey, that didn't work. We should probably do it a different way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, well, cool. Well, this was a good episode. It was spotlight on me this time around.
I love it.
But I think, at the same time, I fit a certain example. Nick's had examples. And just to talk to the crowd here, like, email us. Let us know. Have you had a past failure? You had to shut down a business. Why? What'd you learn from it, and how much of it did you apply to your next business or your next job? Like this, and this. I learned this, and all of a sudden you now have a skill set you may not have had before.
That's right.
So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know if you got any other questions, and we'll see you on the next one.
Have a great one. If this podcast inspired you to take action as an entrepreneur, we want to hear about it. Send us an email, agingentrepreneur@gmail.com.
And if you like this episode, please consider leaving us a review or 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to.
Until then, find your dream and keep chasing it.